History isn't just a collection of dusty dates and stern-faced monarchs, oh no. It's actually a treasure trove of the utterly bizarre, the shockingly strange, and the wonderfully weird. If you think our modern world is peculiar, just wait. Let's pull back the heavy velvet curtain of time and step into an era often called the Dark Ages. Imagine towering stone castles, their cold walls echoing with secrets. Picture vast, untamed forests where anything might lurk in the shadows. Think of monks hunched over delicate manuscripts, carefully recording a world that often defied logic. This was a time when faith, fear, folklore were woven together so tightly that it was hard to tell where one ended and the next began. The medieval period was a world lit by firelight and ruled by superstition. Life was often short, harsh, and utterly unpredictable. Perhaps it's this very uncertainty that gave rise to some of history's most baffling episodes. People sought explanations for the inexplicable, and their answers were sometimes more bewildering than the original mystery. They saw the hand of God, or the devil, in everything from a poor harvest to a sudden illness. This wasn't a failure of intelligence, it was a completely different way of seeing the world. A lens through which the line between the natural and the supernatural was beautifully and sometimes terrifyingly blurred. So, forget what you think you know about knights in shining armor and damsels in distress. We are not here for the fairy tales you've already heard. We are going on a journey into the strange underbelly of the past. We are digging up the stories that were too odd, too unsettling, or simply too unbelievable to make it into your school textbooks. These are the tales that remind us that our ancestors were not just simple figures in a history book. They were complex people living through extraordinary times, grappling with a world that was, by turns, magical, terrifying, and profoundly strange. Prepare yourself. We are about to venture into a past that is far more fascinating and peculiar than you could ever imagine. We will witness plagues that made people dance themselves to death and see a dead man put on trial by his successor. We will follow hopeful children on a tragic pilgrimage and watch as barnyard animals are hauled before a judge and jury. These events are not myths or legends, they are recorded facts from a time when the world operated by a very different set of rules. So, hold on tight, the past is a foreign country and we're about to explore its most curious corners. Our first stop is Strasbourg, in the year 1518. It starts with one woman, Frau Troffea. One hot July day she stepped into the street and simply began to dance. There was no music, no celebration, just a silent, frantic jig she could not stop. Within a week, dozens of others had joined her, their bodies seemingly possessed by an unseen force. This was the dancing plague. The authorities were baffled. Were these people mad? Were they possessed by demons? They believed the dancers needed to get the fever out of their systems. So they built a stage. They even hired musicians and encouraged the affliction. The result was a grotesque, deadly spectacle. Hundreds were swept up, dancing relentlessly in the city square. They danced until their feet were bloody and raw, until their bones fractured, until their bodies gave out. Day after day, the macabre festival continued. Men, women, children jerking and twirling in a trance. Many collapsed and died from sheer exhaustion, heart attacks, strokes. Imagine the horror of watching your loved ones, their faces contorted in agony, unable to stop their limbs. The dancing plague remains one of history's most chilling medical mysteries. From a plague of the body, we turn to a perversion of justice. Rome, year 897, the Cadaver Synod. Pope Stephen VI had a serious grudge against his predecessor, Pope Formosus. So what did he do? He had Formosus's body, buried 9 months, exhumed. The decaying corpse was dressed in full papal regalia, propped on a throne in the courtroom, and put on trial. This was a literal, ghoulish prosecution. Imagine the scene, the rotting body of a former pope, silent and grim, facing his accusers. A young deacon spoke for the deceased while Stephen screamed questions at the corpse. The verdict was guilty. As punishment, the 3 blessing fingers were hacked off his right hand. His papal vestments were torn away, and he was declared illegitimate. His corpse was dragged through Rome, then thrown into the Tiber River. A gruesome display of political vengeance that horrified medieval Rome. Our next story is one of heartbreaking innocence. It is the tale of the Children's Crusade of 1212. The official crusades, waged by knights and kings, had largely failed to reclaim the Holy Land. Then a new idea sparked across Europe, an idea born of pure faith. It was said that the innocence of children could succeed where the sinful armies of adults had failed. 2 separate movements emerged, one led by a German boy named Nicholas of Cologne, another by a French shepherd boy named Stephen of Cloyes. They preached that the Mediterranean Sea would part for them, allowing them to walk to Jerusalem on dry land. Inspired by this divine promise, thousands of children along with some poor adults and priests abandoned their homes to follow these young prophets. They marched for hundreds of miles, a river of youthful hope flowing south through Europe. They had no weapons, no training, and very little food. Their only armor was their unwavering belief. But the sea, of course, did not part. The crusade dissolved into tragedy. Many of the children starved to death on the journey, while others were sold into slavery in North Africa by unscrupulous merchants who had offered them passage. It was a devastating end to a movement built on childish faith and desperate hope. From the tragedy of lost children, we move to the absurdity of animal justice. In the medieval world, it wasn't just humans who could be held accountable for their actions. Pigs, rats, weevils, flies could be formally charged with crimes and put on trial in a court of law. These weren't mock trials for entertainment, they were serious legal proceedings, complete with lawyers for both the prosecution and the defense. Witnesses were called to testify, evidence was presented, and legal arguments were made. A lawyer for the defense might argue that the animal was not of sound mind or was provoked. In one famous case, a group of rats was put on trial for destroying a barley crop. When they failed to appear in court, their lawyer successfully argued that the summons was invalid because it did not guarantee his client's safe passage past the village cats. If found guilty, the animal could be sentenced to public execution, usually by hanging or burning at the stake, serving as a warning to other potential four-legged criminals. Not all strange tales from this era are grim or gruesome. Some are just delightfully peculiar, like the legendary discovery of one of the world's most beloved beverages, coffee. The story takes us to the ancient highlands of Ethiopia, around the 9th century. Our hero is a humble goat herder named Kaldi. One day, Kaldi noticed something very strange about his flock. After munching on the bright red berries of a particular shrub, his goats became incredibly energetic. They started leaping, kicking, and dancing with a joy and vigor he had never seen before. They were so lively they refused to sleep at night. Curious about this phenomenon, Kaldi decided to try the mysterious berries for himself. He found that he too was filled with a newfound energy and alertness. Excited by his discovery, he brought a handful of the berries to a monk at a nearby monastery. The monk, however, was suspicious. He declared the berries to be the devil's work and promptly threw them into the fire. But as the beans inside the berries began to roast, they released a wonderfully rich and enticing aroma. The smell was so captivating that the monks raked the roasted beans from the embers to investigate. Intrigued, the monks decided to experiment. They ground up the roasted beans and dissolved them in hot water, creating the world's very first cup of coffee. They soon discovered that drinking this new brew helped them stay awake and focused during their long late-night prayers and devotions. The devil's berries had become a divine gift. The news of this magical beverage spread quickly from monastery to monastery. The drink that made goats dance and monks pray with renewed vigor soon traveled across the Arabian Peninsula and eventually to the rest of the world, sparking a global obsession that continues to this day. While the story of Kaldi and his dancing goats may be more legend than verifiable fact, it captures the spirit of discovery and the unexpected ways that history unfolds. It's a charming and whimsical tale that reminds us that even in an age we often associate with darkness and hardship, there were moments of simple, joyful surprise. Who would have thought that a flock of hyperactive goats would be responsible for the morning ritual that billions of people now depend on? It's a perfect example of how the most extraordinary things can have the most humble and bizarre beginnings. So there we have it, a journey through a medieval world that was far from ordinary. We've seen a city forced to dance to a deadly, silent rhythm, a dead pope judged by a living one. We've walked with children on a doomed quest for a miracle. We stood in courtrooms where pigs and rats were tried for their crimes. We've even witnessed the joyous, jittery discovery of coffee, all thanks to a herd of dancing goats. These stories are more than just historical oddities. Close-up of ancient manuscripts, they are windows into the medieval mind, revealing a worldview that was profoundly different from our own. A world steeped in faith, fear, wonder. These events challenge our neat and tidy view of the past. The Dark Ages were not simply a backward and unenlightened time, nor a dull waiting period between the fall of Rome and the dawn of the Renaissance. They were vibrant, chaotic, pulsing with life in strange, contradictory forms. Our ancestors were not simple caricatures. They were complex people navigating a world where the line between the sacred and the profane and the natural and the supernatural was constantly shifting. Their reality? A plague could be a divine curse. An animal could possess a soul culpable enough to stand trial. By exploring these peculiar episodes, we connect with the humanity of the past. Ultimately, these tales leave us with a sense of enduring mystery. History is filled with whispers, stories yet to be fully understood, events that defy easy explanation. The past is not a closed book, it's a vast, mysterious landscape with shadowy corners we have yet to explore. For all we think we know, history will always have the power to shock, to baffle, and to fill us with a profound sense of wonder. The next time you sip your coffee, perhaps you'll think of those dancing goats and smile. Subscribe for more strange and fascinating history.